What's up, guys? Yasuke here. So during the preseason, I thought it'd be fun to play on Korea, but I didn't want to go to Korea, so I figured I'd just play from NA, and I had 140 ping, and I got from hardstuck Plat 3 to Diamond 1 on Korea in about 150 games, and I wanted to talk about my experiences on the server, because I've heard a lot of just misinformation about how playing on Korea is actually like, so I wanted to give a first-hand account of what it's actually like to play on Korea from mid-plat to Diamond 1 on Korea, and let you guys know what it's actually like. So, yeah, here's where I started off with. The account started off hardstuck Plat 3. I was getting plus 16 gains at first, and I was getting as low as plus 13 minus 21. So it was really, really bad gains. Even at the end, I was getting plus 14. It was a very hard stuck account, which gave me a really good experience of more games on Korea in that elo range. If I was playing on a fresh account, it definitely would have been faster. So made this notepad of all of the points of my experiences on Korea. So we'll go through this a little bit. First, we'll go over the playstyle in Korea. So, this is all in preseason games. The playstyle on Korea is much better mechanically, but there's a lot worse decision making. Like, they'll always be willing to take the skill check, and which means they will be more open to giving up shutdowns, which means that it'll be easier to get comebacks. And they always sort of lag behind on updating to new builds in meta. As an example, I played in Korea in Season 8. And in Season 8, I was playing mid Tryndamere. And every jungler, without fail, every single game, wanted me to take the second blue buff as Tryndamere, and they would flame me if I didn't. And giving mid laners every second blue buff was not a thing even in like Season 5 in NA and in Pro Play. But mid in Korea has always been a sort of like idol role where people look up to mid laners like Faker, like Showmaker, and there's been this big Korea has always been a mid lane kingdom region that is defined by having the best mid laners. And so there's this little bit of a minor idol worship in the sense that if there's a pick or something that a pro player plays that has a lot of success, they will just spam it without actually thinking about anything. So, for example, the setup that Deft played in Game 5 of the World Championship, almost every game would have a Caitlyn who would use that exact same build path, exact same runes, because they wanted to copy that amazing performance from Deft. The problem is that build doesn't come online until like 4 items, and it does almost no damage into tank teams. But there's not really a lot of emphasis put on builds. There's a lot of emphasis put on mechanics, but if there's one thing that NA is actually the best at, it's thinking about builds. And people in NA focus so much on having the optimal build. And for example, in Korea, lagging behind on builds, people will still build Gore Drinker on Aatrox 6 months after that's been the best item. So Gore Drinker wasn't a good item on Aatrox, and they're still going to be like permanently building it. And it's going to take a long time for them to actually stop doing something like that. And one thing is that higher general mechanics on everybody makes certain champions more viable, and especially since there's a lot more permafighting, champions like Nidalee almost never okay to play on NA. You are a terrorist if you play them on NA. But in Korea, champions like Jace and Nidalee are perfectly fine. When I see them locked into my team, I don't feel like it's going to be an auto-lose. Because even first-time Nidalees on NA are more mechanically proficient than Grandmasters NA and Nidalee OTPs. Like, even if it's somebody off-roll. Like, the general level of mechanics is so much better. Pure scaling is not viable in Korea because of how much there's a permafighting culture. NA is the only region that will have Challenger Sona OTPs. Like, in Korea, Sona is never really going to have a lot of success. So a lot of picks that are super, super hard scaling are going to have a lot less success on the region. Yeah, so you need to play to not tilt your teams. And then also comebacks are much more easy if you're disciplined. So what I mean by comebacks are more easy is if you have somebody on the enemy team who has a massive shutdown, they're going to always take the risky 1v3 situation, and they're probably going to int their shutdown. And if you just don't int your shutdowns, then if you don't int your shutdowns, you're going to be able to get a lot of wins from getting those massive gold swings that Riot has added to the game that Korea hasn't really picked up on how important bounties are. Like, just objectively in the game right now, if you have a bounty, the worst thing that you can do is die. If you die one time after you killed them many different times, you're going to have a real hard time in your games. It's really important to protect bounties, and Korea doesn't really think about that at all. And bounties have become just so much more powerful, so it's become so much more important for that, and Korea just doesn't really consider that. You need to play to not tilt your teams. So kind of what this means is that there are going to be plays that are going to be more objectively viable in terms of me as mid Tryndamere. There are going to be some times where it's best for me to have red buff. The jungler should not have the red buff right now. However, if I feel like they're going to run it down if I don't give them the red buff, I'll give them the red buff. It's only a minor inconvenience, but it's really important to make those little decisions to actually maintain the integrity of the game by keeping people's mentals in check. So you don't want to have an ego and you don't want to play selfishly, even if it's the objectively better play to do. And there's a couple other points that we have in playstyle later on that we'll go into. So, but first we'll go over what it's like to play on an A with 140 ping. Is kind of the best way that I would explain it is that out of 100 possible fights that I know are possible to take, 30 of them were not possible due to high ping. So this forced me to find the more reliable plays that didn't require me to do those hyper minuscule outplays that I know are possible and that I could do on a lower ping, but I just can't do on 140 ping. So I got a lot better at taking those 70 plays while avoiding the 30% plays. And certain matchups were way harder due to ping. So, as an example, Akali. Akali is generally a hard matchup for Tryndamere, but it's possible on low ping, because you want to be spacing and like weaving and tethering with them, which is not something that's possible on high ping, because you have to play like reactively like here. Whereas if there's a lag, like you're going to be lagging with them. So matchups like Akali are impossible to deal with in lane. And everybody on Korea also plays the high mechanical skill check champions like Akali, like Yone. So I would often ban Yone. And everybody on NA is an Akali, Yone, and Silas 3-trick. That's most of the champions that people play. So whenever I played against champions like Akali, because I can't ban both of them, I would have to find other ways of playing the game that weren't necessarily doing anything in lane. And so with the internet, my internet was very fine for most of the climb, but especially towards the end, my entire internet started disconnecting at 40 seconds into the game because of VPN issues. So here's an example of what would it be looking like. I would get 40 seconds in, and then my entire internet would go out. My game would go out, my stream would go out, every other page would go out, and I would have to manually restart the stream. Yeah, so I'd have to manually restart the stream. And so when I was in games where this stuff was happening, my mind was just completely out of it, because I was focusing on, can I make sure that my stream is still up? Can I make sure that like I have to make sure that all of these things are okay? Because sometimes my stream wouldn't start back up instantly. So I'd have to close OPS, reopen it, and then restart the stream. Which made it to where later on in my climb I was having a lot of difficulties because of my mind being completely out of it because I'm having to focus on these other things. And with my playstyle, as you know, level 1 is so important. So me having those issues level 1 was becoming a pretty big issue. So consistent high ping was actually fine. Like, when I was getting used to the 140 ping, I really didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. I felt like I could get to most of the level that I would have gotten to on low ping. It's really just those disconnects that took me out of the game. And it would take time to warm up to the ping, but eventually it became normal. So, like, at the start of my session, I'd be canceling so many auto attacks, I'd be, like, awkward, I would feel sluggish. But after a certain point, my mind got attuned to it, so it became much easier later on during a session and later on during the climb in general. So as my next point, it's about climbing with a hard stuck account, which is not something that I've ever had to do before, especially at this elo. Like, climbing a hard stuck Plat 3 account 2D1 is something that I've never actually had to do before. And my gains were as bad as plus 13, minus 21. And I had to win streak often to climb with those gains, which was fine. Like, the games weren't super hard, so it actually wasn't that big of a deal. The better mechanics that Korea has was leveled out by worse macro. So if you were able to play a solid macro game and just know where to be and all of that kind of stuff, the better mechanics were offset by the worst macro, so it roughly leveled out. Like, Korea, if you just look at the mechanics, they're way better. But since they have worse macro, it's not actually harder to climb on. It wasn't any significantly harder to climb from Plat 3 to D1 relative from NA to Korea. And Korean Plat is easily just as easy as NA Plat. I got out just as quickly as I did on a account that I had on NA in a similar elo, despite the ping. So even with the ping and me being so much worse mechanically because of this, it really wasn't that much of an issue. In Diamond, there isn't super big of a difference. The best that I could say is that high D4 on Korea is about D2 on NA, and that Korean D1 is about sub 100 LP Masters NA. And when talking to others who have played on Korea, that's kind of the gist that I get, is that Korea isn't insanely better until about 400 LP. That's when it becomes leagues and leagues above NA. And I was never able to plateau and reach my peak due to DC issues. Like, I was climbing with 67, 68% win rate. So, wasn't really able to peak, but I will be playing on Korea again later, and I'm going to be hoping that my DC issues stay fixed, or if they do get fixed, then I'll be climbing on Korea again. Crucill is a guy who ended rank 69 on Korea, and he's seen my gameplay, and he assumes that on 140 ping that I'll be able to get to about 400 LP. So that is my goal. My goal is to surpass the expectations that he has as somebody who's played on Korea and has seen my gameplay. The climb would have been faster on a fresh account. If I played on an account that was just a pure level 30 that had a flexible MMR, it would have been a lot faster for me to climb. But it was still easy on a hard stuck account, because ultimately these are still Plat games. These are still Diamond games. There's nothing that makes playing on a hard stuck account any harder. It might just take a few more games, but it's really not that big of a deal. So a couple more points of compared to NA. NA is deathly afraid of taking any fight and just wants to permascale. Like, if you wipe a team late game and there's a possibility to end with like a 10-second leeway, oftentimes they'll just take Baron or take a Dragon instead of ending the game, which is very, very possible. There's a lot of times where dives will be something that is possible, but then NA players will be very scared to take these plays. And this was after I played on Korea, I went back to NA, and I kind of got this like shell shock of everybody being so afraid to fight was just so much harder for me to play in. Because my playstyle is something that is so aggressive that it makes Korea look as passive as NA. I am, like, Korean aggression is a 10. NA aggression is a 3. My aggression is a 15. So, like, it was really, really hard for me to transition back into NA. I have a play that's an example. This is actually from NA. But this is a very rare example of NA taking a play that this kind of thing would happen on Korea all the time. Of trying to take these fights. And fights like this are exactly why Korea is so much better than NA mechanically. Because they're willing to take these limit test fights. So just here's an example of this fight. And this is in Challenger MMR. Tons of LCS and Academy players in this game. So first off, I'm taking a fight level 2 in their jungle as a mid laner. We're 3v3 under the enemy turret, level 1, level 2. And you see just how aggressive we're still going. Oh my god. We are just built on another level. But yeah, just look at how aggressive we are. This is the kind of play that would happen almost every game on Korea. People will at least try to go for these plays. And going for those plays is exactly why Korea is so much better mechanically. So yeah, that kind of passivity on NA is something that I've also heard from people who are EU players who go on NA. They say very similar things. And this level of aggression is why Korea is better than NA at a pro level. Because you can teach macro. You cannot teach hands. This reminds me of when Chovy was first discovered by the Griffin coach, CV Max. Chovy was a master tier Cassiopeia one trick who had no concept of macro at all, but was still really, really good at the actual mechanics of Cassiopeia and had no idea about back timings, setting up items, setting up plays, warding. He had no idea about any of these things. So CV Max just took in Chovy and taught him macro, and then all of a sudden he became one of the best mids in Korea. And one of the best mids in the world, who won an LCK title, is by many people considered one of the best players. Q times are also so low compared to NA, especially in Diamonds. And they rarely dodge too. So, as an example, in a 6-hour play session, I can get about 4 more games in the same time on Korea compared to NA. So you can get in way more games in the same amount of time, which is just, it's amazing, especially as a streamer. And as somebody who just doesn't want to sit in queue for more than you actually play. So, a couple other things. How to play on Korea from NA/EU, because a lot of people have been asking that. One is that you need a VPN for your game to be from Korea. Exit lag is the one that was recommended to me by everybody, and that's one that I've been using. But exit lag, for me personally, has been giving me a lot of internet disconnect issues. So maybe other ones don't have that issue. Your account will get locked if you play from outside of Korea. So make sure that when you're playing on Korea, you always have your VPN. And you need to be able to get your account unlocked if it gets locked. And to get it unlocked, it needs to be from somebody who has a Korean phone number that the account is tied to. So how to get an account? So first off, according to Riot, I am a Korean citizen who lives in Seoul. On a completely unrelated note, it pays to have Korean friends. If you need to buy an account, get one that can be unlocked for a fee. When you look at accounts that are for sale, if you type in buy Korean LOL account, there'll be ones that'll say unlock for a $5 fee. Those are the ones that you'd want to get. But ideally, on a completely unrelated note, just have a Korean friend. That is the most reliable way, is to have a Korean friend. Like if you're an NA collegiate player, that might want to play on here. A lot of collegiate players are Korean citizens. So just ask around. Ask around if that's something that you want to look into. So another point is looking over mentality and toxicity. 1 second. So on the level of toxicity on Korea, I never paid attention to the chat at all. I just pretended that everybody was AI and bots. If people were just spam pinging typing, I wasn't thinking about that in my head. I was just thinking, like, how do I play the game? Like, that's all I was thinking about. And one thing is that I once thought that all chat removal was a bad idea everywhere. And if you remember when they were trying to remove all chat, they removed it, and then they said, they did this Riot backpedaling thing where they said, oh, some regions complained about this a lot, so we're going to get rid of all chat removal. We'll keep all chat on the servers that complained and still get rid of it on servers that didn't complain. And I always thought that was kind of like a half backpedal of this thing that Riot does, which is never take accountability of it just being a bad idea. But in Korea, it actually could be... I'm willing to consider that removing all chat is a good thing in Korea, because when all chat did exist in Korea, they would just permanently call for open mids. And that's not possible anymore, because you can't talk to your enemy in a game. So permanently calling for open mids was something that was done so much in Korea. And so, according to people that I've talked to who've played in Korea forever, Korea did become noticeably better after all chat was gotten rid of. And with that, people are much quicker to sell items and stand in a brush to give up on a game in Korea. And they're unapologetic about it. In NA, they will just soft int and grief. And you kind of have this hope that they're going to play the game again. But in Korea, like, they're very explicit on, like, I am 100% not trying. However, if you start making plays without them, they'll often start playing the game again. And the best, like, that's a thing that people don't really see. There are so many times where I had a teammate who, like an AD carry, who got left alone bot and died a couple times. They would sell their items, buy Moby boots, and just go AFK in a brush or something. The rest of the team would still be making plays, and then eventually, once it looked like we could potentially win, they rebought real AD carry items, and they'd start playing the game again. So if you start playing really, really great, they will start playing the game again. At least from my experience, I've had that a lot of the time. And so yeah, they commit harder to inting, no soft inting, they don't try to hide it, which is just Chad. It's just not pretending to be something you're not is just incredible. Incredible that they just own up to the fact that they're just trying to run it. My early aggression of how often I try to invade level 1 and take these really aggressive early fights led to more jungles going AFK relative to NA. There are so many times where I'd win games in 6 minutes because I would get an early invade, I would kill the jungler, I would go to the other side of their jungle, kill them again, they'd AFK. Which was amazing. It's so great. It's so great doing that. So I'd get so many early games from that. Early victories from that, which is great. And yeah, just to reemphasize the tip, ignore the AFK inting, and many will eventually try hard again. Which is not something that's ever really done on NA. If somebody is going to soft int, they're more likely to just keep on soft inting. And they will be more likely toxic to somebody who is playing passively. So Korea is a perma-fight region. If you are playing passively, like, you're going to tilt everybody because they want to fight, and the best play, if everybody wants to fight on your team, is for you to fight. If you think that you're doing the most objectively correct play, and it's just not in line with your team, then it's not the objectively correct play. You have to play according to how your teams play. So if your teams want to permafight, you need to be on the same level as them. The best way... there's a way that I heard Thorin explain this, which is that if somebody is... they look at Uzi, how Uzi I plays Vayne, and they try to play like Uzi I in their gold games, and it just fails. Even if they play like Uzi I, the problem is that Uzi has a team that's playing entirely around him, and he gets all of this extra free space because his team is actually thinking about it. When you're playing in gold as a Vayne player, you need to be acknowledging that you have gold teammates, and you will not get the same amount of peel from your team, so you need to be playing around that. You need to be playing according to how your teams are. So you really do need to play to the Korean style if you're going to have success on Korea. But really, it's just ultimately permafight, which is just great. NA is passive-aggressive soy new male behavior. They won't admit that they're inting. They won't directly int you. They'll just kind of be like a passive-aggressive, like, oh, I wish my jungler was as good as this guy, or like, you know, we're all doing well. Like mid-top and the AD carry are doing really well, implying that the jungler isn't doing well. Like they'll just do all of these passive-aggressive remarks because people have been trained to not directly say what they think on an A. Because if you directly say what you think on an A, you're gonna get banned. So it teaches people to do this, like, soy new male, like, passive-aggressive stuff that is just super... It's so much more annoying to deal with. And Korea is just Giga Chad unapologetic. They're not gonna pretend to be something that they're not. If they want to enter your game, you're gonna know about it. And they're not gonna pretend like, oh, no, I'm not actually entering your game. You're entering your game. Like, what are you doing wrong? Like, that's the kind of NA thing. Korea will not play out 95% chance losses as often as NA. NA is the hostage server, where they will take the game that has almost a 0% chance to win, and they'll still try to play it out, which is just so annoying. Whereas I prefer the FF culture of Korea, where, like, if everybody on a team is losing and you get outscaled, the game will be FF'd. Whereas in NA, if you're playing Pantheon, Nidalee, Jace, Kalista, Leona, like a really, really squishy early game team, and you're losing to the Exodia scaling comp, people in NA will still play that out. Whereas in Korea, nobody would ever think about playing that out. And this kind of goes into another thing is that that I can elaborate on in future content, is that League is a social manipulation tool in NA. And it hasn't really been optimized for Korean culture. If you look into Riot Light and a lot of the things that he's done, NA is too obsessed with the anti-toxicity culture as Riot's pushed it. Riot Light was the first person that introduced the concept of toxicity in gaming. And Riot's stated goal explicitly is that they want to change you as a person to make you a better person through their, like, anti-toxicity stuff. Korea is much more similar to pre-2012 gaming culture in the West. Like, the kind of stuff that you'd see in, like, Modern Warfare 2 lobbies, that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see in Korea. Because they haven't been socially engineered to revere this, like, anti-toxicity stuff, where somebody saying bad words is more detrimental than somebody running it down. For example, NA players will brag about their snitch cards, which is their player report feedbacks. Like, people have been trained to want to snitch on others to get their player report feedbacks of, like, yeah, you snitched on somebody and we punished them. Like, that feels great. And there's a lot of studies and stuff that I can go on to this later of Riot talking about psychology conferences where they would elaborate on these kind of things, which I'll go into at a later point, but this video mainly about Korea. And yeah, ultimately, Korea is not much harder to climb on than NA. If you are Plat in Korea, you're gonna be Plat on NA. It's really not that big of a difference. And, like, Tryndamere is definitely something you can play on Korea. It's really all about how you kind of do it, and if you get those perma fights, you'll be very successful if you can understand how to kind of perma fight. It's not that much significantly harder. until you get to the higher elos. But in Plat and Diamond, it's really about the same as NA. It's about the same as EU. So let me know what you guys think. Have any of you guys played on Korea? What's your experiences there? What have you guys seen as examples of other people playing on NA? One other thing is that there's this concept that Korea is a really common region for people to go to for boot camps. And there's this idea that people are all given Riot accounts. And like every streamer is given a Riot account that starts off with like a D1 MMR. That's just not true. A lot of people who get those Riot accounts, like Tyler1, start off with an account that has just basic real MMR. It doesn't start off with a special D1 MMR that's only given to pro players. Almost every streamer who goes to Korea plays on an account that is not a special MMR account. When Dopa talks about those special MMR accounts, he's talking about ones that are given to like Chinese tier 2 players that have Challenger MMR to start off with. That is not something that is relevant at all to Diamond. These Riot accounts are not some... in 150 games playing from Plat 3 to Diamond 1, I probably never played with a single one of those special MMR Riot accounts. Those are not a real thing. This is kind of completely irrelevant to the climb. Everybody is starting off with low MMR accounts and they're climbing them up. I see so many examples of this. Those accounts really aren't actually a big issue. So, yeah, that's another point. Those things are only really given to pros, and so we see... Another thing is that we see so many examples of people getting to very similar MMR thresholds on Korea relative to their main region. So Tyler1 got to like 500 LP, like he peaked GM in Korea, I believe. And that's about similar to the level that he's roughly being at on NA. Like Tyler1 does peak Challenger on NA, but in a month, while being target inted, he got to a very similar LP on Korea. There's some people that I was talking about with Elo Santa's climb. People in Korea are a little bit... people in EU are a little bit sketch on the level of play that Elo Santa has on EU, and are surprised that he's getting to the same level on Korea. Because Elo Santa got pretty close to his EU to Korea ranking. They're very similar. One other aspect is that people are going to be more willing to try hard when they move to another country to play. But overall, people don't have too big of a disparity climbing. Like, there's an Oceania Katarina OTP, who's Challenger, who got Grandmasters in less than a month. And that's on Oceania, which is one of the worst servers in the world. And an Oceania Challenger was still able to get GM really, really quickly. So Korea is not super, super insanely different until really, really high elos. Yeah, Midbeast, other examples of Oceanic players. There's a ton of examples of Oceanic players, Latin America North players. Jose Dioto, like, bottom 2 NA LCS jungler, gets Challenger on Korea pretty easily. Like, there's not an insane difference until you get to super, super high levels, and especially when you're talking about players on like high, like Challenger on NA, EU, even Oceania. It's really not that insane until you get to the high Challenger. So let me know what you guys think. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy this. And what do you guys think about Korea as a server? Any of you guys play on it? Any of you guys see other people play on it? What have you guys seen relative to your favorite streamer who plays on Korea versus your favorite streamer playing on NA? See you guys all in the next video. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye. And good night. Peace.